How many would diagnose themselves as a control addict? Okay. Yeah. So an interesting and curious experience in my own life was when I started to research and understand control. Because that's my go-to. My default is I'm a student, I want to understand it. I don't understand why I do certain things. When I was 20, I didn't understand why I was intimidated by certain people. Right? When I went out into direct sales, into the field, you knock on doors. I immediately found out that I was really intimidated by so many people. And I allowed them to make me feel intimidated before I even showed up on their doorstep. And there were certain types of people that were okay. Like we all have this certain comfort zone of the population. There's a certain type of person that we're comfortable around. Then there's these certain types of people that we're not comfortable around. And we don't want to be around those people. And all of us can have this recipe book that exists for us. The goal is to not allow the person you're interacting with have any bearing on whether or not you're comfortable with yourself. That's the goal. I'm comfortable with me. If we're going to do business, that's a separate transaction. And none of that has anything to do with the way that I feel or think about myself. So learning how to have influence over that part of you is something that's unbelievably powerful when it comes to being a leader, when it comes to being somebody who can execute on command and not stop giving yourself permission to play. Control is too restrictive. The only thing that we should have control over are things like this. Right? It's like the whole habits thing. It's the automated stuff. Everything else we have to give ourselves permission to just simply have influence. We can influence our thoughts. I have to learn how to influence how I feel. I have to learn how to influence what I think about in order to be able to influence what happens every single day. I had a season in my life when I learned that lesson served up unbelievably harshly. I was running a sales organization that was the largest that's ever existed in this country. I had over 1,000 sales reps that were working with me. I had 45 locations all across the country. Things were crazy. I was busy. Money was insane. And I was unbelievably unhappy. And somewhere inside I knew it, but it was like this little pop-up that there was this upgrade available. And I was like, remind me later. Because I did not want to face that. Like there were so many people that I was so intricately involved with in the life that I had worked my tail off to create, that the consideration that possibly I had gotten it wrong was overwhelming and terrifying. At that time, for me to be able to execute on a day-to-day basis, it took absolutely intentional programming, more so than I had ever experienced in my entire freaking life. I had to have a clash of airtime going on with what was really happening inside of my head, because my own voice was shouting at me to start to pay attention, and I didn't have the time to listen to her because I had all these things I had to do in order to run a business that was so big. So I learned how to have influence by drowning out the voice that was the more negative voice. And learning how to have influence is something that all of us can do, and all of us can do in a second. Fighting for control, there's just fight even in the suggestion of that. So when it comes to leading yourself, when it comes to looking at your life, I would eliminate the concept or the need from having to have control over anything that doesn't come packaged in a remote. Because your energy is being spent fighting for something that is irrelevant. Influence is all that's required.